A very warm welcome and good evening to everyone on behalf of Consortium of Accredited Healthcare Organization. Today, we have come to our second session on this webinar series, which is on how to frame a research question. I would like to thank everyone who has joined this and are showing their interest for improving their knowledge on research. To all the committee members, mentors, and our guests who have joined, a big thank you. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Shweta Prabhakar, our chairperson of KAHU Student Research Mentoring Program, state representative of KAHU Punjab region, head quality and patient safety Fortis Hospital Mohali, to deliver welcome address for today's event. Over to you, Dr. Shweta.
Thank you, Vaishnavi, and a very good evening to all of you. And it is basically a proud privilege to welcome our esteemed guest panelist, Professor Sanjeev from IIM Shillong, our committee members and our mentors who have come and joining this session, our panelists, our students, and our webinar attendees. Now, as you know, the KAHU Student Research Mentoring Program is it is a program which is being envisaged by the KAHU leadership. Now, this program is for the students and this to foster that research culture in the country amongst the students. The students from any discipline and who are keen to conduct research, maybe some quality improvement projects, including innovations in healthcare industry, shall be benefited by enrolling into this program. The program has a robust culture, structure and support by Students Research Mentoring Executive Committee. Now, this is also supported by expert pool of mentors across various disciplines. Now, when the students enrolled, the enrolled students shall be mentored throughout their projects or throughout their study by the individually assigned mentors. And during their study or during their research projects, where if the student requires support from like the institutional support or maybe a resource like a statistician or analysis support, they would be provided, by this committee on this program. Now, the students will also be encouraged to publish their results in various forums such as conferences, journals. And this is not the end. We also have intent to give them a cash award of rupees 5,000 for those students who achieve the publication level. And this will be awarded by KAHU. I hope you will all partner with us and encourage the student community to participate. Now, today's session, as we know, we have our esteemed guest panelist, Professor Sanjeev from IIM Shillong. He will be talking about the importance of study design. This will be followed by how to frame research question by Dr. Hemchand. He's a clinician and one of the committee members. I once again thank you to all the panelists who have joined here, along with the webinar attendees. I hope you will enjoy the session. Over to you, Vaishnavi. Please start the session. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, I would like to invite our very special guest for today's session, Professor Sanjeev Kakote. He is faculty IIM Shillong, chairperson for development of Northeastern region IIM Shillong. He was born and educated in Shillong. He has done his PhD in History of Technology from NEHU and completed 3 TP program of management from IIM Ahmedabad. He is a teacher, writer, and a documentary filmmaker. His latest book entitled Science, Technology, and Social Formation in Medieval Assam was published by Cambridge University in 2012. Sir, over to you.
Thank you very much. I think you can stop the screen sharing, otherwise I keep on looking at myself. Yes. Thank you very much, Dr. Shetwa. I had met in the last webinar on the masterclass. I am particularly appreciative of the work and activities of KAHU who within a very short span of time has been able to establish itself as one of the foremost organizations in healthcare management in the country. And I'm very happy and proud that Kaho and IIM Shillong are working together on shared objectives and shared goals. So coming to the seminar topic today on the question of study design and research questions, how do we pose them, what do we do with them? And since the audience is essentially composed of students and researchers, I start from the very basics. So if some of you think that this is something that you all know, you'll have to bear with me. What happens is that when we start our journey on research and on publication, what we see is the end product of a few years of rigorous work. And what we see is a paper, what we see is a formulation of a problem, the way it has been addressed. So what we see is the end product. Likewise, when we, supposing we are trying to eat a dish, or a dish is presented to us in somebody's home as we are invited as a guest for dinner. So what we see is the end product laid out beautifully on the table. What we do not see is the kind of work that has gone into making it, the kind of difficulties that the person cooking it must have felt, the difficulties the person had in deciding to cook A and not B. So these are the things that come in. So trying to see the end product without being appreciative of what went into it, I think is one of the major problems that all researchers face. So in other words, what we see is a very, very condensed and a very, very filtered outcome of a research that might have started off somewhere else and has ended up somewhere else. So what I'm trying to say is that all researchers actually need to start from the wide angle, in the sense that we call it the funnel approach. So in the funnel approach, a whole lot of things are put in together, and it is only towards the end of the research that we narrow it down, and output or an outcome comes out of it, which is much more concentrated. Now, trying to put the funnel upside down and thinking that I will look at a problem in a very, very microscopic way and come up with a solution sometimes is the wrong way of going about it. And this is very true in social sciences from where I come, or in management studies, where it is difficult to pinpoint that this is the problem and this is the solution. So what I would like to implore upon all of you is the need to approach the funnel approach. Look at a problem from multiple perspectives, look at it, a problem from a wide angle. Now, if you notice, we call it research and we don't call it a search, because it is expected that there is already something on the table, there is something already present, and so somebody has searched and put it there, and our job is to research it and kind of establish it in a newer way. So why on earth would somebody be interested in researching, trying to find out something that is already there? Now, the whole need for research actually starts from two things. One thing is a curiosity to explain and understand why things happen the way they do. And the second is, if there is a problem, how can I sort it out? So even when we know that why things happen the way they do, there are always questions as to, can I make it better? Can I do things better? Can it be simplified? Can it be modified? Can it become better? So that is when the research begins. Now, humans by nature are never satisfied with what they have. They always try to challenge the status quo. So one of the primary requirements of a researcher and in research design is the vital ingredient which propels you to challenge the status quo. Now, had there been no challenging of the status quo, we would have still believed that the earth is the center of the universe and everything else moves around the earth. There were a few individuals who said that, I think this is not right. I think there is a problem with this assertion. But mind you, when they thought that there was a problem with this proposition that the earth is at the center of the universe, the established belief system very, very strongly held that the earth is at the center of the universe. The geocentric and the heliocentric perceptions of existence in this universe. So the church at the time in Europe, which was very, very strong, the Catholic Church, it said that no, the earth is at the center of the universe, and everybody who said that it was not so, they challenged it, were treated as heretics. So people whose name you might know, Copernicus, Bruno, Galileo, they were all people who were thought to challenge the church. And people like Bruno were actually burnt at the stakes. And Copernicus said, I recant, I take back whatever I was saying. Because the established order was so very strong, saying that the earth is at the center of the universe. It was much later that it was established that what those 1, 2, 3, 4 individuals are saying was actually the truth. And it became the new normal for people to say that it is the sun which is at the center of the universe and everything else moves around the sun. Now, it took a few brave individuals to challenge that status quo and say that this may not be right, and I will try and prove it that this is not right. Now, with regards to every major disease that we have had in our living memory, there has always been a set of assertions which says that this is what has caused the disease and this is how it can be solved. Till not very long ago, fever and other kinds of diseases were thought to be caused by problems in the blood. So bloodletting was a very, very regular method of controlling diseases that were there. And it was only very recently that bloodletting was proven to be ineffective in doing whatever was being done. So also a lot of assertions regarding pandemics and even the COVID-19 that we have are being challenged by people who are being discounted, who are being thrown to the sidelines, saying that this is not true and the assertion of the mainstream is the truth. Now, for any researcher, it is difficult to accept anything as the truth, because the first thing that we need to challenge the status quo. So everything that is said needs to be seen with a with some amount of skepticism, to say that if this is so, why is this not proved? Why is that not proved? Now, in a situation where we do not question the established belief, there will be no progress. So apart from having a healthy dose of skepticism, we need to look at various parameters that may contribute. Now, in the modern healthy practices or modern economy, a little while ago, I just finished a class half an hour ago, and we were talking with my PGP students about what Adam Smith had said. And Adam Smith is supposed to be the father of economics and the father of the free market. But it is the same very Adam Smith who also said that I do not support monopolies. I want numerous small operators to operate to make the economy successful, whereas the world is going towards monopolistic trends. So which means that what was said by a person who is often quoted is not actually what he said. So there is always a need to look back and see what was said and what is being meant at this point of time. It may not be true. So one is the funnel approach, where we look at a number of problems together and then try and narrow it down as we go along. Now, for instance, supposing we are looking at, say, the role of diet, the role of what we eat, the role of microflora in our gut system, the gut bacteria that we have, that is a very, very vital ingredient for preventing a lot of diseases that have become so common today. So how do we promote healthy gut bacteria? That is something that would need to be looked at. And to look at gut bacteria, we'll have to look at food. To look at food, we'll have to look at agriculture. To look at agriculture, we'll have to look at the various agricultural practices. We'll have to look at the origin of seeds. We'll have to look at the use of pesticides, fertilizers, the waters, the water table, and things like that before we can come in. So the issue at hand might be the gut microflora or the gut bacteria and its relation to health. But while looking at it, we may have to go into agriculture, to seeds and to fertilizers and to chemical pesticides, which might give us an indication of what are the things that is affecting the gut bacteria. So it may be very, very possible that I may say that, look, I'm interested only in the gut bacteria, I'm already interested in the microflora, and I want a paper out of this. And I look at only secondary information about gut bacteria and microflora, and not look at what is actually influencing the formation and death of microflora. Might give me a paper, yes, but it may not add to the body of knowledge that is there in the world. So two things that are extremely important for a researcher is to know that it is not only the research publication that I'm looking at. Actually, I'm looking at how much of knowledge I am adding to the existing body of knowledge. So a research paper is only the byproduct. It cannot be the primary objective. A research paper will come out from any good research that you do that adds to the body of knowledge. Unfortunately, because of the points that are given for research papers, research has almost become like a routine affair, where I look at 20 papers that have been published in different parts of the world. I kind of work on it and come up with a small little tweaking of those papers and come up with a research paper. That does not add to the body of knowledge which is already existing. So in the end, my output in terms of adding to the total knowledge is extremely less or even negative. So it is very important for me to realize that the reason I'm spending so much of time in trying to either articulate a solution that I have, or articulate a problem that I have so that others can look for solutions, is essentially trying to add to the body of knowledge that exists. And the paper publication is but a byproduct of all that is there. Now here I am tempted to recount the names of two scholar philosophers from Greece, and one is Aristotle and the other is Plato. Now Aristotle is known as the father of deductive logic, and inductive logic is also there. We learn a lot of things from deduction. For instance, if I throw up a ball in Shillong, where I'm sitting now, the ball is going to go down. And Dr. Prabhakar, who's I think sitting in Bombay, throws up a ball, it's going to go down there. And Dr. Lalu Joseph in Vellore throws up a ball, it goes down there as well. So which means that is the same force of gravity that is at work here. And if there is one place where it's not working, maybe it's the moon. So we've got to find out what is causing gravity in Earth and not gravity. So if it happens here, it happens there. So I can deduce that if it is happening in Shillong, which is in the Earth, and it's happening in Bombay, which is also a part of the Earth, that means I can deduce and induce that it's going to happen anywhere in the Earth. So that is deductive logic. Into this came a scholar by the name of Socrates. Sorry, not Plato, Socrates. Now, Socrates was somebody who was always asking why. His favorite question was why. And whenever he asked a why, he would follow it up with another why. So somebody may say that, why are we sitting in front of a computer and talking to the screen? I said, because there are people at the other end of the screen. So why are the people at the other end of the screen? Because we are having a conference. Why are we having a conference? Because we want to add to the body of knowledge. Why do we want to add to the body of knowledge? So we can go on and on and on. So sometimes when you ask too many questions, you end up with uncomfortable answers for the powers that may be. So Socrates was told to shut up. And by the powers then, and his reply was why. So he was locked up and asked to drink poison, and he died as a very young man. So these are the two things. One is deducing from a body of knowledge that already exists, you extrapolate it and then come up with answers. And the other is go into fields there where there are no answers. So the one thing that we said at the beginning is that we must challenge the status quo, because we know that it is always possible to improve systems. Now, as of today, what happens is, and this is data that I pick up from my last class half an hour ago, or 45 minutes ago, is that in the last 30 years, more than 50% of the people of this world have been pushed to a state of less than $2 a day, which means that the total output of the world, the total trade of the world, the total production of the world has increased by many thousand times, but the total number of people who are living below the poverty line have also gone up. And in sheer numbers, the total number of people going to bed hungry have also grown. So which means that people are going to bed hungry. It means that the number of people who may not have access to good healthcare facilities and the other basic amenities of life would be also very, very high. So which means that we can improve upon our health delivery systems, we can improve upon the way our organizations function, we can improve upon the way healthcare is delivered, the way research is being done in order to make things better for all of us. So I know that I have been given 15 minutes and I don't know whether I've exceeded my time because I didn't really look at the watch when I started, but I was thinking that by 6:30 sharp I'm going to end. So I may end a couple of minutes before that. I will just recap whatever I have said for the benefit of all the participants. One is that we should have the courage and the conviction to challenge the status quo, because if we keep on supporting the status quo, there is no change going to happen. Challenging a status quo sometimes is very, very difficult when you are working, but challenging the status quo when you are a research scholar, when you're an academic, is that much easier because it is supposed to be for academic reasons. The second thing is that we need to adopt a wide angle lens. Just because we are looking at a produced paper or something, we cannot say that this happened just like that. It has gone through a very, very difficult process where a number of things were looked at. The third thing that we do is we may formulate a hypothesis thinking that this is the problem and this is the answer. But problem is when we reach a certain stage in our research, we find that the hypothesis was completely off mark. It was off the line. At that time, we should have the courage of conviction to say that this hypothesis was not quite right. I may change the hypothesis. A lot of researchers actually, because they have spent 2 years of their time or 3 years of their time following up a particular hypothesis, even though they know that it may not quite be right, they try and prove that it is acceptable and right because they have spent that much of time. I think that is intellectual deceit that we should avoid. And fourth is, you have the ability to make a difference. Please do. You will make a difference. Thank you very much. I'm sorry if I've overshot my time. Thank you.
Not at all. Thank you very much. It was really enlightening and it was wonderful. Very nice and crisp, thought process. I really appreciate. And it's wonderful to hear. And some of the very key learnings that will jot it down also to remember, for my lifetime. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Over to you, Vaishnavi.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your expertise. It was very interesting listening to you. Just a minute. Now I would like to invite Dr. Hemchand Krishna Prasad. He is committee member of
Vaishnavi,
Consultant Department
Vaishnavi,
Chennai. He
Vaishnavi,
endocrinology, co-edited endocrinology, national and international conferences. Yes, ma'am.
Vaishnavi, your voice is cracking.
Yes, ma'am.
Maybe it's breaking up.
Ma'am, is it okay now?
No,
You may try switching off your video.
Sir, sorry.
Yeah. Now it's better to start.
Yeah. He has uh, he has developed the Diabetes Carb app and DKA app for practitioners, has won in Innovative Teacher Award from ANBAI 2019 and Active Pediatrician Award 2017 IAP TNSC. Over to you, Dr. Hemchand, for presentation on how to frame a research question.
Good evening, everybody. I would like to thank the wonderful opportunity that has been given to me. So I think over the next 40 minutes or so, we will try to focus on how to choose a research question, which is I think the fundamental to understanding and formulation and execution of a successful research project. I would like to acknowledge my research mentors who have always inspired me to contribute in terms of research of my research mentors. And I do practice pediatric endocrinology, so I think whenever I present some of the concepts, there might be an influence of this background on this. Please apologize me for that, and I have no other conflicts of interest to declare. So I think the birth of a research question, if you look back into Indian mythology, it started off many, many years ago. I think the biggest epic, which is a part of our nation, was born with a question that was raised to the author of the great epic. So these are the aspects which I would like to cover the important talk of how to frame a research question. So first coming to the background and importance of framing a research question. I think a proper research question is a backbone of research. It is the foundation stone on which a research project it builds on. It has a very good impact on the policies, on the understanding of the disease, on the management of the disease, on investigation of a particular process, long-term health of mankind and such. It is pivotal so that a successful message emerges from the study. And a properly framed research question defines the study type, whether your study is going to be an RCT, whether your study is going to be a simple observational study, whether your study is going to be a simple case series. I think that is going to be determined by the research question. A research question should be original and it should be applicable in your setting. And a focused research question forms the foundation of strong research. So having understood the importance of the research question in the successful execution of a research project, what are the types of research questions that a researcher encounters in his experience? So let us take the example of a simple condition called as goiter. This is the spectrum of goiter, the thyroid swelling, which is seen in children, which can vary from a simple goiter to an autoimmune problem, to a congenital genetic problem, to a malignancy. All of them form an important concept, important cause for goiter, thyroid enlargement in children. Suppose a researcher is focused on exploring the various aspects of goiter in children. What are the ways he can do it? A simple question: does iodine deficiency cause goiter? This is a simple question. Existence of phenomena, the incidence, the prevalence. Does iodine deficiency, what is the prevalence of iodine deficiency in goiter in children? What is the incidence of iodine deficiency in goiter in children? So simple existence of phenomenon can be the first research question. The second research question is a description of the cause of the etiology. What are the causes of goiter in children? I think that's an important message to the public. How much is because of iodine deficiency? If it is significant, it is a public health problem. What is the prevalence of simple goiter? If it is high, it should sensitize the public health workers that don't go for aggressive measures whenever you see a goiter. If there is a significant presence of malignancy, it is again an important message for the clinician that he should look for red flag signs of malignancy and pick up children with malignancy early. And if there is a significant prevalence of hyperthyroidism, which requires surgical management, again, that's an important message for the for the clinician to guide these families properly. What are the stages of goiter? An initial stage where it is not present, where it is just palpable, where it is visible, where it is monstrous. The scientific evolution of the goiter itself is an interesting research question. How many of them are picked up in stage 1? How many of them are picked up in stage 2? How many of them are picked up in stage 3? I think that is an important focus of research question. What are the stages of goiter? The next, focusing or exploring a relationship or evaluating a diagnostic test. When you supplement these children with goiter, with thyroxine, does it cause regression of the goiter or does it cause expansion of the goiter size? So a diagnostic test is explored, a relationship is explored. When you give cough syrup, does it lead to goiter development? They're exploring a relationship between a cause and an effect. And lastly, comparative or analysis of two modalities of intervention. What is the ideal way of treating a hyperthyroid goiter? Is it radioactive iodine ablation or is it surgery? Here, you're comparing two different modalities of intervention and you're focusing the research question. The research question is going to help you identify whether method A is superior to method B, whether method A is comparable to method B, whether method B is superior to method A. This sort of a comparative analysis is another way a research question can be focused. Thus, you can see a simple clinical problem like goiter. There are multiple ways of framing a research question in terms of the causality, description, natural stages, relationship, cost effectiveness, and comparison. So I think it's very important that a research question helps us identify the focus of interest which a researcher tends to develop. Okay, having understood that, now we have understood number one, the importance of background and importance of a good research question. What are the types of research question? Coming to the third important concept, how to formulate a research question. How should a researcher formulate a research question? This involves four important steps. The first step is to identify the area of interest. What is it inspires the researcher? It can be a personal interest. As a researcher, I am fascinated by growth of children. It can be my experience. As a medical student, I measured the growth of a lot of children. I found a lot of variability. This experience stimulated me to take up a lot of research. An important observation. When I conducted a school camp, I found a lot of short children, obese children in this particular school. An information that struck my mind and stimulated my research. Practical problem. I found a lot of children with short stature being discriminated at school, being teased at school. So this is a practical problem which I thought stimulated me to find out why is it that these children have to be short and they have to be teased at school. Scientific literature review. I read a lot of medical journals, and those medical journals I read a lot of information on short stature, and that stimulated me to take up growth as an area of research. And theories. I mean, it is a theory. A lot of children are tending to be more and more taller in subsequent generations. My son is taller than me. I am taller than my father, and my father is taller than his father. What is it that makes every subsequent generation taller? This sort of an interesting observation stimulated me to study growth across generation. So I think simple things define what is your area of interest. Attending medical conferences, when you listen to an interesting talk, interesting research work by a previous researcher, you are stimulated to take up research in that particular arena. At simple medical teaching, simple attending medical rounds, when you find a lot of practical problems which is faced, you find that stimulates a person to take up research in that particular observation. Informal observation often lead to innovative medical questions. Why is it that all the children who are coming from this particular district always have short stature to a tertiary care institute? Why is it children coming from this particular village always being obese in this particular village? Is there something to do with the environment? Is there something to do with the genetics? These sort of informal observations often trigger innovative questions. So I think important that you should keep daydreaming and thinking about more and more research and be alert to new ideas. Another important way an area of interest can be developed is doing an audit. When you audit your own management, your own way of managing patients, your own way of looking at things, you tend to develop a new area of interest. So I think the first step in development of a research question is defining the area of interest. Simple observations are often the birthplace of research. So I think a creative mind and a methodical approach helps a researcher find out what is it that he should focus on. Having understood what we should focus on comes the second step, a preliminary background reading in the topic. Perform an extensive literature review. Read what is available and see where the gap is. I realized that I had a lot of interest in short stature. I read up extensive research on short stature. There was already information available of how much of our Indian children are short, how much of Tamil Nadu children are short, how many children with short stature have hypothyroidism, how many short stature children are being teased. But I found out that very few data is available on how do these short children respond to treatment. I realized that there is a lot of information available on this aspect of short stature, but this aspect of short stature, how they responded to treatment. Did the short children, when they were intervened, develop normal stature? When they intervened, did they develop tall stature? Did they affect any side effects? These sort of things I found were unexplored. So arriving at an important conclusion, what are the gaps? What requires further understanding is a second important step. Reading and analyzing where the gap is. What is the concern? What is not known? What is unique area that is unexplored? You have to perform an extensive reading and find out where the gap is. So having identified step one, found out your area of interest. Step two, you have found out where the gap is. Number three, arrive at the research question. How do you arrive at the research question? Ask simple open-ended statement. Why is it that my children are short? Why is it that they are short? How is it that I picked it up? Try to narrow the focus of research. Why is it that children from Kanchipuram district alone are short? Why is it that children from this particular village in that district are alone short? Why is it people from this particular thing are short? Why is it that this particular school children are short? So trying to narrow the focus of research, trying to narrow the scope of research is very important to frame the research question. And a simple concept, time-tested concept is the PICO concept. A research question must contain an ideal one. Majority of the good research questions must contain these four important concepts. P for population, I for intervention, C for comparison, and O for outcome. The research question should define the population. So this study is trying to explore the growth of children in this particular area. So defining the population. So that is P. Number two, refer to the intervention or the exposure. Why is it the children who are born small for gestational age in this particular village? So an exposure to poor intrauterine life, an intervention, poor nutrition. That is the intervention, I concept. C, comparison. Compared to children of this particular village, how do the growth of these particular village perform? You have an identified study group and you have a comparison control group. So this is the comparison, the C concept. And O for outcome, whether identification of short children and correcting it improves the health of these children. So outcome of your study. So your research question in an ideal world should cover all the four: the population, the intervention, the comparison, and the outcome. All the four concepts must be focused in the research question. So remember one thing, all research questions is not possible to have all the four important terms. PICO is applicable only in specific study groups, but I think majority of the concepts in PICO must be involved in your research question to make it relevant and useful for the community. By mentioning who is the population, what is the exposure or the intervention, does it involve the comparison group, and is it reflect the outcome which is beneficial to the mankind? PICO. So whenever you frame a question, don't make it complicated. Don't make it judgmental. Don't make the research question sound as if you're giving an answer. Is there a significant prevalence of hypothyroidism in short children in Kanchipuram? So what is it that you're trying to do? You're trying to put the blame on hypothyroidism. Don't put implications, don't be judgmental. Remember to have a correct sequence of events. Remember, clinical medicine always starts with history, physical examination, biochemical testing, and intervention. So whenever you're going to describe a profile of a disease, always remember to describe the clinical, biochemical, and investigatory profile of this particular disease. The sequence is very important, and always don't add words to make it sound like an element of bias. So these are the precautions one must follow while framing the research question. Once you have explored your area of research, you have done an extensive literature search of finding out where the gap is, you have framed the research question, now you're going to evaluate the research question. I think what Sir had mentioned previously, the funnel approach, you're doing an extensive understanding, doing a proper literature survey, you're arriving at the research question, and number 4, like a funnel approach, you're fine-tuning the research question. You're evaluating and assessing your own research question. Does it set the context? The study which you're trying to do, is it relevant? Suppose you're going to do a study on smallpox vaccination, which has been eliminated long years ago. It is not relevant for today. Is the research broad or narrow? Suppose you want to do a study of a thyroid cancer in the school. It is irrelevant because of the rare problem. How many children are you going to find in the school? So it should be researchable and measurable. Does it reflect a problem statement? Again, you cannot go and assess the smallpox vaccination status in today's world because the disease has been eliminated. Does it add focus to the problem? And does it help you in data collection? These are the important aspects which help you evaluate the research question. So just to sum up the 4 aspects of framing the research question. Number 1, I think that it's just a continuation of what the previous speaker said, a funnel approach. Have a broad idea of your area of interest. Number 2, go in and do an extensive literature search and find out where the gap is. Number 3, arrive at a broad research question using the PICO concept, the population, intervention, comparison, and outcome. And the tip of the funnel, find out and reassess your research question and fine-tune the research question. So this are the 4 important steps in framing a research question. Framing a research question is a tightrope walk, and it is the most difficult process a researcher is going to undergo because of the complexity involved in the same. So let us try some sample examples. I thought I'll take 2 important samples. Example number 1. We conducted a camp. We called all children and their families with diabetes, and we educated them on type 1 diabetes management. In the camp, the question arose to us. Does this camp, is it going to help these children have good glycemic control? Is it going to help these children in their future health? Well, we thought that was an important research question. So having found out our area of interest, number 1, we went to the second step, which is performance of an extensive reading. An extensive literature survey was done. And of course, there was previously available literature on this, but there was a gap. There are no Indian studies which give a clear answer whether this sort of a camp education is going to improve glycemic control or is it not going to improve glycemic control. Is it an effort worth taking or is it an effort not worth taking? So having identified my area of interest, I found out what are the gaps in literature. I framed a research question. Does diabetes education help in glycemic control in juvenile diabetes? I repeat, does diabetes education help in glycemic control in juvenile diabetes? So I defined my area of interest. I did a literature search. I arrived at the research question. Now I'm going to apply the PICO concept and fine tune it. Remember, a good study must contain PICO, the population. I realized that I have to include my study population, which is parents of children with diabetes. Number 2, I raised the I concept, intervention. What is the intervention in the study? The intervention is structured diabetes education in a camp. I'm going to educate the families about all aspects of diabetes in a CAMP model. So the intervention is structured diabetes education. Coming to the C concept, comparison. So when I have a group of children whom I have educated about diabetes in a camp, I look for a comparison group who are also on follow-up with me, but they do not attend the camp. So comparison is a group which has not attended the camp. And what is the outcome? How am I going to quantify the improvement in glycemic control? I'm going to take a well-accepted model, that is glycosylated hemoglobin. So now look at my research question. I have applied the PICO model: population, intervention, comparison group, and outcome group. So all the four I incorporate, and look at my research question. Does structured diabetes education provided in a camp help in improving the HbA1c in children with type 1 diabetes compared to those who do not attend the camp? So I've defined my population, which is parents of children with diabetes. I've defined my intervention, which is a structured diabetes education. I have included a comparison group, a group which does not affect the camp, and I have defined the outcome, which is an improvement in HbA1c, glycosylated hemoglobin. So now the research question now looks very perfect. Does structured diabetes education provided in camp help improve HbA1c in children with diabetes compared to those who do not attend the camp? Is what my research question is. So I hope I'm able to judge. I'm going to emphasize to the audience the importance of the PICO concept: population, intervention, comparison, and outcome. Let me take another example. I was looking after a family with type 1 diabetes, and the family came up with an interesting question. How should we dispose the needles? How should we dispose the lantus? Should we throw it into the dustbin? Should we dig it and bury it in our garden? Or should we just give it to you in the hospital? I thought that was a very, very valid public health problem. When you have a lot of needles that are generated in your own house because of diabetes, where should you throw it? How is it that our family is disposing the sharp waste? A simple question that was raised by the family became an important research question in our unit. So the area of interest was generated, and the area was, where are our families disposing their sharp waste that is generated in their households because of diabetes? Where is it that they are disposing? So that is the first question, development of the area of the interest. Step number 2, doing a literature search and finding a gap. Does it exist? So this is an extensive literature survey that we have found out that there is no clear answer to this question from South Indian settings. There is no clear answer to this particular concept. So question number 3, part number 3, I framed a basic research question. What is the pattern of waste, sharp waste disposal by families with diabetes? So having realized the research question, I applied the PICO concept and tried to refine my question. What is it that you do? P, problem identification. The problem in this particular research question is significant sharp waste generation. Significant sharp waste generation. And what is the intervention one can do? Provide a sharp disposal bin. I can give these families a sharp disposal bin and tell them to put it in that and provide it to the hospital. I realized that this requires a group whom I have not given the bin and see who does it appropriately. So a control group which has not been provided with a sharp disposal bin. And the outcome is a safe disposal technique, a technique of disposal of sharp waste that is safe for the community, safe for the patient, and safe for the doctor. So the defined research question was, what is the mode of sharp disposal by families with diabetes on follow-up at our center, and the impact of a sharp bin on the pattern of disposal. So I have a problem, sharp waste identification. I have an intervention, sharp bin disposal. I have a control group who is not given the sharp bin, and an outcome of interest, that is safe disposal technique. So I have refined my research question using the PICO concept. P for problem identification, I for intervention, C for control group, and O for outcome of research. So this is how a research question is developed. Coming to the second last aspect of the talk, what are the attributes of a good research question? A good research question should be feasible. You cannot do something imaginary which is not possible in your setting. You should choose a topic that can be done in your own center and it can benefit the community and the pool around you. Is it in the ability of the researcher? Is the time period reachable? Suppose you're a postgraduate for 3 years. You cannot draw up a 10-year plan for your project. Methodology. You should be able to take up a methodology that is feasible for your study. When you're doing an intervention, that intervention should be available. The funding for the intervention should be available. And it should have a realistic scope. Suppose I want to do a research on a disease that does not exist. I suppose I want to do on Ebola. The disease is not existing now at this particular point. So it should have a realistic scope and necessary gadgets and documents must be available. So feasibility is the first important term. F for feasibility. I for interesting. It should be interesting and beneficial to the community and the population. It should give new findings and it should be simple and clear. It should not be something which has already been done. Suppose you put forth a research question for which multiple times people have given a clear answer. It is not interesting. It should be novel. Don't copy from something. It should not be usually established fact. Some new aspect of diagnosis, a new aspect of therapy, a new aspect of intervention. The novel concept is very important. It should be feasible, it should be interesting, it should be novel, and it should be very importantly ethical. Your experiment, your research should not be unethical to harm an individual. It should protect the privacy, it should maintain the confidentiality, and at any point of time, the subjects must have a right to withdraw. So you must have an institutional ethics committee approval, and that should be the basis of answering, of taking up this research. And lastly, it should be relevant. It should fill up a gap. It should fill up a gap of what is known and what is not known. So I think this is very important to give a proper research question to the community at large. So just to sum up, what are the attributes of a good research question? Finer. F for feasible, I for interesting, N for novel, E for ethical, and R for relevant. So these are the 5 important aspects of a good research question. For example, let us just try. This is a spectrum of abnormalities which is seen in obese children. Hypertension, hepatomegaly, hirsutism, papilledema, and it can be obesity in children can be because of genetic problems, syndromic causes which have hypotonia, squint, polydactyly. A superficial research question would be what are the causes for obesity in children? What is the percentage of nutritional? What is the percentage of hormonal? What is the percentage of systemic? What is the percentage of genetic? These are important aspects, but this study would be feasible. This study would be ethical. This study would be relevant. But is it interesting? Is it novel? What is new that this study is going to tell you? Any textbook of pediatrics is going to give an answer for this particular question. To make it more novel, to make it more interesting, the study question may be modified this way. What are the factors that help a pediatrician identify non-nutritional obesity in Indian children? When you see an obese child, these factors tell, yes, this is nutritional obesity. Give them diet advice. These factors tell it is non-nutritional obesity. Look at these children more carefully. So what are the factors that distinguish between these two groups of children? Is there a research tool that can be applied to identify group 1 and group 2? This would be a more interesting and relevant and a novel question. So this is a child, this is a congenital hypothyroidism screening that is done to pick up hypothyroidism. And this is a classical hypothyroidism that is missed by screening. A simple research question is assessment of utility of screening of congenital hypothyroidism in children. It seems interesting. It is relevant because hypothyroidism is very common in our population. Is it novel? Is it ethical? Is it right to have a group of children whom you know you have to screen, but you don't screen? What is new? It is already known that hypothyroidism is a well-established practice in developed countries like Australia and Europe. Why is it that you're going to, what is it that you're going to say new out of this study? So these sort of, the finer concept is not satisfied in this research question. Hence, we modify the research question and give this particular observation. Comparison of the growth and development in children screened for congenital hypothyroidism versus those who have a delayed diagnosis. So this, you're comparing a group which is screened with a group which is unscreened. And you're saying which group has a better height outcome, which has a better mental health outcome, and an IQ outcome. So this study is feasible, interesting, novel, ethical, and relevant. Finer concept. So I think these are the important attributes of a good research question. And I come to the last aspect of my talk, which is what are the common problems in framing a research question and solution. As a practical researcher, what are the problems that we face in framing a research question and its execution and tackling? So these are the conventional IAP charts which help pick up growth disorders. Where what charts on the left side are the new IAP charts with pickup. So the charts on the right side were developed in 1992. The chart on the left side were developed in 2015. So these are the BMI charts. Does the new IAP chart help pick up more growth disorders? So I am a clinician who used to diagnose growth disorders by using the old IAP chart. So by adopting the new chart, will I pick up more growth disorders? Should I have a change in practice? This is a research question. But what is the problem with this research question? It is too broad. Whether this question is applicable in rural and urban, in high socioeconomic as well as low socioeconomic. So the question is too broad. So what is the solution? Specify lesser variables and narrow the question. So how should this research question be modified to tackle this problem? A better way is to frame it this way. Does the utilization of the new IAP charts to identify growth disorders in 5 to 10-year-old from the particular socioeconomic urban children, low socioeconomic urban children, when compared to the old IAP charts? So I'm selecting a specific population, low socioeconomic urban children, and I'm selecting a specific group, 5 to 10 years. And in this group, I'm assessing their growth based on the old charts. I'm assessing their growth based on the new charts. Thus, using the new chart help pick up more growth disorders. So my research question has narrowed down, more population specific and more result oriented. So lesser orientation and the funnel approach, which was spoken about by the previous speaker, a broad research topic and a narrow focused research question, which is going to give a specific answer. The answer will be yes, it's going to help you. No, it won't help you. So this question has to be answered by giving a very good research question. So this is congenital adrenal hyperplasia, a genetic disorder where you have children with a lot of metabolic problems. There is a significant, this metabolic problem is set, as a clinician, I observe that a lot of cardiac problems are present in these children. They have hypertension, they have cardiac failure, they have cardiomyopathy in children with salt wasting crisis. So this topic is given to a DNB postgraduate to take up research. What are the problems he faced? In his 3-year period, he does not get adequate subjects. So how should you cope up with this particular problem? The solution is extend the inclusion criteria, modify the exclusion criteria, and lengthen the study time. Don't restrict yourself to just salt wasting crisis, CAH. Include the other types of CAH. So your base population is becoming more wider. So you're expanding your study population and trying to arrive at the requisite study sample. So you're modifying the research question to suit and give a sensible answer to your research question. Fatty liver. Accumulation of fat in the liver is an important metabolic problem in growing children. So what is the prevalence of fatty liver in children with obesity in a tertiary care center? This is a broad research question. So the researcher finds out, suppose I am the researcher, I find out that I don't get a good radiologist who's helping me to pick up fatty liver by ultrasound. So what is it? You'll have to collaborate. So you have to collaborate and learn new skills. So how would you modify the research question? the assessment of prevalence of fatty liver in a tertiary care center in collaboration with the radiology department as assessed by an ultrasound. You take in more help, you take in more personnel, and you modify the research question to give a more sensible answer. So this is basal bolus regimen, which is given to children with diabetes to improve glycemic control. And as a researcher, I want to know whether this particular insulin regimen is superior to the conventional split mix, whether one regimen is superior to another insulin regimen. So what is the problem I encountered? Too expensive. I find out that my patients are not able to afford the care with basal bolus regimen. So what is the alternative? Alternative is you change from pen to syringes, you follow them up less frequently, and you use alternative tools for glycemic control assessment. So you modify the study research question to make your study more feasible and a finer concept, more interesting, more novel, more ethical, and more rational. So I think these are some of the examples I thought I should share so that how a practical and important sensible research question like a funnel leads you to a sensible answer. So just the take home points. A good research question is the fundamental for a good research. It is the background on which the research house is built on. A good research question determines the type of study, whether it is going to be an observational study, whether it's going to be an RCT, whether it's going to be a descriptive study, whether it's going to be a cohort study, whether it's going to be a case control study, is going to be determined. Identify the area of interest. Have a simple funnel concept. Find your area of interest. Do an extensive reading and find out the gap. Arrive at a research question and evaluate the research question by the PICO concept. What is the PICO concept? PICO. Identify the population of interest, identify the intervention, identify the control group if feasible, and identify the outcome of interest. The research question in an ideal world should contain all the four concepts of PICO: population of interest, intervention, control, and outcome. Find out if the research question has all the attributes of a good research. The finer concept: is it feasible? Is it interesting? Is it novel? Is it ethical? Is it relevant? Finer: feasible, interesting, novel, ethical, and relevant. And find out smaller problems and try to surmount the problems. I think the message of this talk is use the PICO concept to frame a research question and use the finer concept to see whether your research question has the attributes of being a good research question. A good, sensibly framed research question always funnels into a successful, a good research project, giving good message for the community. Thank you very much for your patient hearing. I'm happy to have finished on time.
Thank you, Dr. Hemchand. That was wonderful. That was a wonderful presentation, and it's actually you have covered it so well and very nicely explained with examples. It was the concept of PICO and finer is actually very amazing. So I'm sure the students and the participants must have really benefited by this webinar. I'm sure it's a lot to learn, and when you deep dive in research, it's very good. Over to you, Vaishnavi.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Hemchand, for a very informative session. We have couple of questions to take up.
Okay.
I will put forward those to sir.
So probably I can just ask Dr. Hemchand to stop sharing the screen so that.
Yes.
Thanks.
So the first question is Mr. Chandrakant Bhosle. He's asking, can be the research question modified in between of research?
I think that's a very valid and a practical question that you're trying to answer. So modification of the research question in an ideal world should not be done during the project. That is the fundamental thing. When you start the project itself, you should have a broad and a well-framed research question, anticipating the problems which you are going to likely encounter. That is the importance of doing an extensive research reading, doing a small pilot study, or having a good research mentor who is going to foresee the problems for you, and you don't have to modify the research question. If at all, for unforeseen reasons, you have to modify this, you are not able to proceed forward with the research question, I think you will have to seek the permission of your ethics committee and your scientific committee and see whether, this question, this particular, suppose you started off as a trial and you did not get adequate sample for the people who are going, you are not getting children or families who are willing to participate in this trial. I think that is a very important thing, that you may have to go back to the ethics committee and let them know whether you can go in for an alternative study design. So those sort of things can be done with the permission of the ethics committee and your scientific committee. But in an ideal world, you should foresee all the problems with the guidance of your mentors. You should go in for a question that need not be changed in the future.
Thank you, sir. The second question is, how much prior research question should be framed?
How much prior means, I think you should frame the research question before starting the project. It depends on the type of the project. How much time, in the sense, it depends on the objective, the pattern of study, the study design, etc. So if it is simple observational study, which you're going to conduct over a short period of time, it can be taken up in a short period. But suppose it is a complicated one, it involves a more complicated study design like an RCT or something, it should be well planned out, and you should have a good period of thought process that goes into framing the research question.
Thank you, sir. These were the only two questions, probably because your presentation was so clear and interesting. Actually, we are getting very good responses from the attendees also. So, we will, ma'am, can we move on to the next part? Yeah,
please.
I would if committee members or mentors have any questions or want to add on something, may come up and do that.
Just I want to add.
Yes, sir. Dr. Rajesh Kono, please go ahead.
Good evening to everyone. Okay, sir's presentation is very, very nice, very informative. Anyway, we are following a PICO approach. Then above all, the interest, okay, the motivation of an researcher makes a huge, significant contribution to the research project or an research. Then you cannot change in between when you already framed the question or in research one, that if you want to change also, then you have to take in permission and all the things. Otherwise, usually the university will reject it. This is the one thing I want to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rajesh. Probably that was covered by Dr. Hemchand. He mentioned about that ethics committee approval is required if you require a midterm corrections. Thank you very much for adding up and for the benefit of the participants. Now, Vaishnavi, go ahead with the
yes, ma'am.
Last leg of the webinar.
Yes. Now I would like to invite Dr. Chandana, committee member of KAHO Student Research Mentoring Program, Associate Professor, Nuclear Medicine, working at National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, Bangalore, Karnataka, from last 5 years, to come over and for summarizing and for a thank you note. Dr. Chandana, over to you.
Thank you, Vaishnavi. First of all, I would thank the panelists for giving us a lot of insight into the basics of research. Special thanks to Professor Sanjeev and also Dr. Hemchand Krishna Prasad, who actually addressed about what runs through every, I would say, any student who walks into med school or any college who is looking out for research, because we hear a lot about research, but it becomes a big question mark when we actually start doing it. So having a good mentor who could guide us through the process is very important. So two beautiful presentations we have heard. So Nothing much from my side to add on, but just to emphasize that any research has to be based on evidence-based practice. So that has to be emphasized so that, you know, every student who takes up a research, it could be as simple to a very complicated one, but it should be more of an evidence-based practice, which would ultimately lead to some change in the society and for patient care. So, and Sir has summarized it very beautifully on the PICO and the finer details. So I wouldn't want to re-word it again. However, I like the thing what Sir in fact said about funnel approach. Yes, it's always you have a broad thinking and then narrow it down. And few important things which Sir had told about courage and challenging the status quo. That is quite an important thing to have for any researchers, because you've seen that in your day-to-day practice, you adopt guidelines and you follow it accordingly. But it also is very important that can you challenge it for your patient care and address the needs of what needs to be done at your clinical setting and how it would impact the country as a whole. So be there to make a difference. And anything you do, I would say that please make sure that it is always from bench to bedside, that let it not be at a transitional level and where it won't materialize for any good care for humanity or for the patient. I would want to thank all the committee members, the mentors and the mentee, and Shweta ma'am and Vaishnavi ma'am to give me this opportunity to say this vote of thanks. And a big thank you for all the attendees for showing such an interest and being a part of this research mentor program. And starting it early is very important to get a hold of how research is and how to take your career forward. Thank you one and all. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Chandana. Thank you very much for summarizing. And at this last onset of this, commencing the webinar, I would now like to announce that the students who are enrolled students who are attending this webinar and who have gone through this presentation by Dr. Hemchand would appreciate if they can transcribe. Any one of them would volunteer to transcribe the whole webinar, because we want to develop maybe a research publication out of this, and basically it will help them to grow, and if gets published. So any one of you would come up, and please raise your hands. You can type in the chat box also, that would appreciate transcribing this webinar into a paper. So this is something new which we are going to start going forward, and we will be inviting the enrolled students in the sessions.